If you had told me in 1984 that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles would be more mainstream than mainstream, on Lunchbox, cartoons, family friendly, I would not have believed you. TMT not was necessarily on the fringe of comics, but it was certainly in the margins. It was in the tradition of ElfQuest and Cerebus, where the creators were like these garage bands you hear about, or early punk bands. And they were just trying to make a comic because I like to make a comic. And if it took off, it took off, but that's not the reason it was done. But TMT did take off, as we all know, but not immediately. In around 1987, those of you who are familiar with the Turtles' history and familiar with this book that you see here, know that Eastman and Laird came up with an endgame for their characters in the Mirage line, as it's known, of the original Turtles comics, which are very different than anything else you've ever seen or read afterwards. The influence of Frank Miller is quite clear, not just even if, the creators have admitted this, but even if they had not, you see it. Not just Daredevil, but Ronin. But that they're not the only ones. Stan Sakai's Usagi Yojimbo and the great Japanese comic Lone Wolf and Cub. The end game would be something like The Dark Knight Returns. And if you read Last Ronin, it's pretty much that. If you have not read this book, I would not continue with this video unless you don't mind having basically plot lines revealed or what happens. Michaelangelo is the last survivor. All his brothers and his own father are dead. He is the last Ronin. And he comes back to make amends for himself, his own failures, and also for vengeance, to avenge the death of those he loved. It's a surprisingly good story. I was initially reluctant to read it, but I'm glad that I did, because it made me return to the old Turtle stories. What you see here is issue number 17, which came out about a year after or so when Eastman and Laird conceived of their Last Ronin idea. What would be the fate of the Turtles down the road? It would be a tragic one, certainly. This story here is by Eric Talbot and Kevin Eastman, with artwork by Eric Talbot. Now, the date here is January 1989, which means it came out likely in 1988, in the fall. It's a wonderfully moving story, and it's a romance in the tradition of those 19th century novels. It takes place in feudal Japan, and Michaelangelo is separated from his brothers, and he comes across his old man, his daughter, and his son. If you note the resemblance of the girl, Tai, very much like Elektra. The panels are very representative of very Miller-esque sort of panels, and such. Or maybe Lone Wolf and Cub. Basically, they're going to Kyoto. As you can see, the girl is enchanted by Michaelangelo. The fact that he's a turtle does not matter to her. It never comes up in the story at all. And he finds her quite beautiful. These panels here are quite wonderful. We soon discover that they are on the run from a feudal lord who wants to marry the girl, kill the father and the son to own the property that they own. Michaelangelo, like any one of the turtles, takes it upon himself to basically be their defender. They have not told him their plight. He discovers it, though, and makes it his own business. In this sense, this is something you would see in an Usagi Yojimbo story, and possibly a Lone Wolf and Cub story as well. It's got wonderful panels, great storytelling, and it's extremely serious, as many of the turtle stories were at the time under Mirage Line. One of my favorite panels is when he comes to find the girl. The girl has no idea that the stranger they met would now be their savior, and there she is, and she says, "You came for me." And he says, "Yes, stand back." So he's made this his own fight. You meet the father and the son, the men who want to take over, marry off the girl, kill off her dad and her brother. And you have Michaelangelo standing between them. By the end of the story, Michaelangelo lets them live. They're banished. Then you have these panels here at the end, where the girl comes to him, and she wants him to stay. And she says, "For me." Princess Tai, he says, "I wish I could, but I can't. I must keep searching for my brothers. Together we must return to our home." And he's sorry. And then she embraces him. He's quite surprised. And she says, "I'll miss you, Michaelangelo." And then he scribbles in a journal, "And I continued to wander the land looking for my brothers, but I would never forget Princess Tai." I said she also resembles Electra, but she also resembles the original April, as she was drawn at the time. Here Eastman credits the people who were a deep influence on him. It's a wonderful story, like many of those early Mirage were. There's a colorized version, which is well done. If you find it, I would get it as well. But it's really the originals, if you can. You can find them, and if they're affordable, I would get them. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Last Ronin. Stories. Where would we be without them? Thank you for viewing.